Maya had been walking through the dusty roads of the small mountain village for hours. Her backpack felt heavier with each step, and the afternoon sun was starting to make her dizzy. She had come to Guatemala 3 weeks ago, hoping to find something. She couldn't quite name peace, maybe, or just a place where nobody knew her story. The village was different from the tourist spots she'd visited before. Here, the houses were simple concrete blocks painted in bright blues and yellows. Children played in the streets with homemade toys, and women sat outside their doors, weaving colorful fabric on small looms. Everyone seemed to know each other, greeting with warm smiles and quick conversations in a language Maya didn't understand. Was looking for the bus stop when she realized she was completely lost. The narrow streets all looked the same, winding up and down the hillside like a maze. Her phone had no signal, and her map was useless in this place where streets had no names. A familiar feeling of panic started rising in her chest, the same feeling that had been following her for months. That's when she saw the old woman sitting on a wooden stool outside a small shop. She was probably in her 70s, with silver hair braided down her back and hands that moved quickly as she sorted through beans in a large bowl. Her face was lined with deep wrinkles, but her eyes were bright and alert. She wore traditional clothing, a colorful woven top and a long dark skirt. Maya approached carefully, not wanting to interrupt. "Excuse me," she said in her broken Spanish. "Do you know where the bus stop is?" The woman looked up and studied Maya's face for a long moment. Then she smiled and answered in surprisingly clear English. "You are lost, yes, but maybe not just lost from bus stop." Maya felt her cheeks get hot. There was something about the way this stranger looked at her, like she could see right through all the walls Maya had built around herself. "I just need to get back to town," she said quietly. The old woman set down her bowl of beans and gestured to another stool. "Sit. You look tired, very tired." It wasn't really a question, more like a gentle command that Maya found herself following. "My name is Luz," the woman said as Maya sat down. "And you carry heavy things, I can see. Not in your bag, in here." She pointed to her own chest. Maya didn't know what to say. She had come to Guatemala to get away from people asking questions about her life. But somehow, sitting here with this woman named Luz, the questions didn't feel threatening. They felt ... caring. "I'm Maya," she finally said. "And you're right, I am tired." Luz nodded like this was exactly what she expected to hear. She got up and disappeared into her small shop, returning with 2 cups of steaming coffee and a plate of sweetbread. "Drink," she said. "Food helps everything feel less heavy." As they sat together, Maya found herself talking in a way she hadn't talked to anyone in months. Not about the big things, those were still too painful, but about small things. How she'd always wanted to travel but never found the time. How different everything looked here compared to home. How quiet it was at night without city noise. Luz listened without judging, occasionally asking simple questions that somehow made Maya want to share more. The old woman had a way of making silence feel comfortable, not awkward. When Maya finished her coffee, she realized the panic in her chest had faded away. "You know," Luz said, looking at the mountains that surrounded their village, "I have lived here all my life. 74 years in same place, but I know about running away." Maya looked at her with surprise. "You do?" "Oh yes. When I was a young woman, I thought changing places would change how I felt inside. I went to the city, worked in factory, but the heavy feelings, they followed me everywhere." Luz smiled. "So I came back home, and I learned that sometimes, to stop running, you have to go deeper, not farther." Something in those words made Maya's throat tight. She had been running from her old job, from her family's expectations, from relationships that had fallen apart, from a life that had stopped making sense. Guatemala was just the latest place she'd hoped would make everything different. "I think," Luz said slowly, "that you are looking for something to make the heaviness go away." Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. "There is a place," Luz continued, "very special place in the mountains. My grandmother showed it to me when I was young and my heart was broken." Her grandmother showed her. "Always, when women need healing, they go there." "What kind of place?" Maya asked. Nos was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to share. "Sacred waters. Very old, very powerful. The kind of place that knows how to wash away what you don't need to carry anymore." Maya felt a strange mix of curiosity and fear. She wasn't religious, wasn't really spiritual either, but something about the way Luz spoke made her want to know more. Would you take me there?" The words came out before Maya could stop them. Luz studied her face again with those knowing eyes. "It is not easy journey. Not just walking, though. Walking is hard too. Are you ready for something that might change you?" Maya thought about all the running she'd done, all the places she'd tried to hide. Maybe it was time to try something different. Maybe it was time to stop running away and start walking toward something. I think so, she said. Luz smiled and patted Maya's hand. Good, we go tomorrow, early morning. Bring only what you need, water, some food, and bring open mind. She paused. The sacred place, it has its own rules, its own way of healing. You must trust, even when you don't understand. As Maya walked back to her small hotel that evening, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, hope mixed with nervousness. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in months she was curious about what came next instead of just trying to escape what came before. That night, as she packed her few belongings, Maya found herself thinking about Luz's words. Sacred waters that could wash away what you didn't need to carry. It sounded too simple, too magical to be real. But then again, everything about this day had felt a little magical, meeting someone who seemed to understand her without explanation, finding kindness from a stranger, feeling heard after months of feeling invisible. Maybe tomorrow would be just a long walk to a pretty pond. Or maybe, just maybe, it would be the beginning of something that could finally help her stop running. Maya woke up before her alarm, her stomach churning with nervous excitement. Through her small hotel window she could see the first hints of sunrise painting the mountains in soft orange and pink. She had barely slept, her mind spinning with questions about what the day would bring. At exactly 6 in the morning, she found Luz waiting outside the hotel with a small woven bag slung across her shoulder. The old woman looked ready for adventure, wearing sturdy walking shoes and a wide-brimmed hat to protect from the sun. You came, Luz said with a smile. Good. The mountains are calling us today. They started walking through the quiet village streets as the town slowly came to life. Shop owners were opening their metal doors, and the smell of fresh tortillas drifted from small restaurants. Dogs wandered lazily in the morning coolness, and roosters called from hidden courtyards. How far is this place? Maya asked as they reached the edge of town where paved roads turned into dirt paths. Distance is not measured in steps, Luz replied mysteriously. Is measured in readiness. Some people walk 5 minutes and find what they seek, others walk 5 hours and find nothing. Maya wasn't sure what to make of that answer, but she followed Luz onto a narrow trail that led up into the forest. The path was barely visible, winding between tall trees and thick bushes. Maya wondered how anyone could find their way here without getting completely lost. That as they climbed higher, the air grew cooler and filled with the sounds of birds she'd never heard before. Colorful flowers bloomed everywhere, bright red ones that looked like flames, purple ones shaped like tiny trumpets, and yellow ones that seemed to glow in the filtered sunlight. Maya found herself stopping every few minutes to look around, amazed by how alive everything felt here. My grandmother used to say this forest has memory, Luz said, noticing Maya's wonder. Every person who walks here leaves something behind. Joy, sadness, hope, fear. Trees remember it all. They walked for nearly 2 hours, sometimes talking softly, sometimes in comfortable silence. Maya's legs started to ache, and sweat dripped down her back despite the cool air. Just when she was beginning to wonder if they were lost, Luz stopped and pointed ahead. There, she said simply. At first, Maya couldn't see what Luz was pointing at. The forest looked the same as it had for the past hour, dense and green and wild. But then Luz pushed aside some hanging vines, and suddenly Maya could see through. To a clearing beyond. She gasped. The pond appeared like something from a fairy tale. It was perfectly round, maybe 30 feet across, with water so clear she could see every pebble on the bottom. The surface was completely still, like a mirror, reflecting the sky above. Ancient trees surrounded it, their massive trunks covered in soft green moss and delicate orchids that seemed to float in the air. But it wasn't just the beauty that took Maya's breath away. There was something else, something she couldn't quite name. The air itself felt different here, thicker somehow, charged with an energy that made her skin tingle. Even the sounds were different. The forest noises seemed muffled, as if this place existed in its own quiet bubble. This is Nimya, Luz whispered, using words Maya didn't understand. The sacred water. Very old, very powerful. Maya stepped closer, to the edge of the pond, mesmerized. The water was so clear it almost didn't look real. Small fish darted between the stones at the bottom, and she could see where underground springs bubbled up, sending tiny ripples across the perfect surface. How did you find this place? Maya asked in a hushed voice. My grandmother brought me here when I was 17, Luz said, setting down her woven bag. My first love had married someone else, and I thought my heart would never heal. Grandmother said some pains are too deep for regular medicine. They need ancient medicine. Luz began removing items from her bag, small bundles wrapped in colorful cloth, tiny carved figurines, and what looked like dried herbs and flowers. She arranged everything carefully around the pond's edge, humming softly under her breath. "What are those for?" Maya asked, fascinated by the ritual taking place. "Offerings," Luz explained. "We ask permission before taking healing. Nothing is free, not even from nature. We give respect, we give gratitude, we give intention." Maya watched as Luz lit a small bundle of herbs that filled the air with sweet, piney smoke. The old woman walked slowly around the pond, stopping at 4 different spots to place the carved figurines and whisper what sounded like prayers. "The water here is not like other water," Luz said as she worked. "It remembers everything, all the women who have come here seeking healing, all the tears they have cried, all the burdens they have released. But it also knows how to take away what no longer serves." Something about those words made Maya's chest feel tight. All the things she'd been carrying, the disappointment, the anger, the feeling of being completely lost, suddenly felt heavier than ever. "What do I need to do?" Maya asked. Luz stopped her ritual and looked directly at Maya. "You must enter the water as you came into this world. Nothing between you and the healing waters, nothing to hide behind, nothing to protect you from truth." Maya felt her face go hot. "You mean ... without clothes?" "Sacred water sees everything anyway," Luz said gently. "Clothes cannot hide what lives inside. But to receive full healing, you must be willing to be completely open, completely vulnerable." Maya's first instinct was to say no. The idea of removing her clothes, even in this private place, felt terrifying. But then she looked at the pond, again at its perfect stillness and crystal clarity. Something about it called to her, promising relief from the weight she'd been carrying for so long. "Will you ... will you look away?" Maya asked quietly. Luz nodded, understanding. "I will tend the sacred fire and sing the old songs. The spirits here will protect you. You have nothing to fear." Maya stared at the water, her heart pounding. Every instinct told her this was crazy, that she should turn around and walk back to the safety of the normal world. But another part of her, a deeper part, whispered that maybe this was exactly what she needed. Maybe it was time to be brave in a completely different way. "The water will hold you," Luz said softly, as if reading her thoughts. "Like mother holds child, like grandmother holds granddaughter, like sisters hold each other. You are safe here." Maya took a deep breath and looked around the sacred grove one more time. The morning light filtered through the leaves, creating patterns that danced on the water's surface. Flowers bloomed in impossible colors, and the air hummed with life and ancient wisdom. For the first time in months, Maya felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Maya stood at the edge of the sacred pond, her hand shaking as she stared at the crystal clear water. Her heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. Everything in her logical mind screamed that this was crazy, that she should just turn around and go back to her hotel. But something deeper, something she hadn't listened to in years, whispered that this might be exactly what she needed. Luz had moved to the far side of the pond, and was now sitting cross-legged on a flat stone, her eyes closed in meditation. The sweet smoke from her burning herbs drifted across the water, creating thin wisps that seemed to dance in the morning light. She began humming a melody Maya had never heard before, something ancient and haunting that seemed to come from the earth itself. "The water is calling you," Luz said softly without opening her eyes, "but you must choose to answer." Maya took a deep breath and closed her eyes. She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment, the job she'd lost after speaking up about something that wasn't right, the relationships that had crumbled when she needed support the most, the family who thought she was being dramatic and should just move on, the nights lying awake feeling completely alone in the world. That when she opened her eyes again, something had shifted. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with something else now, determination. She was tired of running away from everything. Maybe it was time to run toward something instead. With trembling fingers, Maya began to remove her hiking boots. The forest floor felt soft and cool under her bare feet. She could feel every texture, smooth pebbles, soft moss, fallen leaves that crackled gently. It was like her feet were waking up after being asleep for months. She glanced over at Luz, who had begun singing now in a language Maya didn't recognize. The old woman's voice rose and fell like wind through the trees, and Maya found the sound surprisingly comforting. It felt like being wrapped in a blanket made of music. Maya unbuttoned her shirt with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The morning air was cool against her skin, and she could feel goosebumps rising on her arms. But along with the physical sensation came something unexpected, a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in years. When was the last time she'd felt the wind on her skin? When had she stopped noticing her own body except as something to criticize or worry about? As she removed each piece of clothing, Maya felt like she was peeling away more than just fabric. She was removing the armor she'd built around herself, the walls she'd constructed to keep everyone and everything at a safe distance. With each layer gone, she felt more vulnerable but also somehow lighter. Standing at the water's edge, completely bare, Maya felt more exposed than she'd ever felt in her life. But strangely, she also felt more herself than she had in months. The morning sun warmed her shoulders, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves above her head. Birds sang in the trees, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear the sound of flowing water. "Now you are ready," Luz called softly. "Enter slowly. Let the water welcome you." Maya put one foot into the pond and gasped. She had expected it to be cold, but instead it was perfectly warm, like a bath that had been drawn just for her. The water was so clear she could watch her foot settle onto the smooth stones at the bottom. Tiny fish scattered as she disturbed their quiet world, then circled back curiously. She took another step, then another. The water rose to her knees, then her waist. With each step, she felt the warmth surrounding her, holding her, welcoming her. It was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. The water seemed alive somehow, pulsing with a gentle energy that made her skin tingle. When the water reached her chest, Maya stopped and looked around in wonder. From inside the pond, the world looked completely different. The trees seemed taller, more majestic. The sky appeared bluer through the canopy of leaves. Everything felt more vivid, more real than real. Loz's singing grew louder, and she began tossing flower petals onto the water's surface. Bright orange marigolds and deep red roses floated around Maya like offerings from the forest itself. Some of the petals stuck to her wet hair and shoulders, and she felt like she was being decorated by nature. Now Luz called out, "You must speak to the water. Tell it everything. All the hurt you carry, all the anger, all the fear. Water listens. Water remembers. Water takes away what you no longer need." At first, Maya felt foolish. How do you talk to water? But as she stood there surrounded by warmth and floating flowers, with Luz's ancient song filling the air, something inside her began to crack open. "I'm so tired," she whispered to the pond. The words came out broken, like they'd been stuck inside her for months. "I'm tired of feeling angry all the time. I'm tired of feeling like everything I touch turns to dust." As she spoke, something incredible happened. The water around her seemed to pulse, like it was responding to her words. The floating petals swirled in slow circles, and Maya could swear she felt the presence of other women who had stood in this same spot, carrying their own burdens to these sacred waters. "I gave everything to a job that threw me away like garbage," Maya continued, her voice growing stronger. "I trusted people who lied to my face. I believed in things that turned out to be fake." With each confession, she felt something loosening in her chest, like knots that had been tied too tight for too long. Luz's singing grew more intense, and she began adding new elements to her ritual. She scattered more herbs onto the water, their scent mixing with the flower petals to create something that smelled like earth and sky and growing things. The smoke from her sacred fire drifted across the pond, wrapping around Maya like invisible arms. "I'm scared," Maya admitted, the words coming easier now. "I'm scared that I'll never figure out how to be happy again. I'm scared that I've forgotten how to trust anyone, including myself. I'm scared that the angry, bitter person I've become is who I really am." As she spoke these deepest fears aloud, Maya felt something shift in the water around her. It was as if the pond was drawing the poison out of her words, transforming them into something that could float away with the flower petals. The tight feeling in her chest began to ease, and for the first time in months, she could take a full, deep breath. Tears began flowing down her cheeks, but they weren't the bitter tears she'd been crying for months. These tears felt different, cleaner, somehow like they were washing away old hurt to make room for something new. The warm water mixed with her tears, and Maya felt like she was melting into the pond itself, becoming part of something much larger and older than her small human problems. Luz's voice rose to a crescendo, and then suddenly fell to a whisper. In the quiet that followed, Maya could hear her own heartbeat, steady and strong. She could hear the water lapping gently against the stones. She could hear the forest breathing around her. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Maya felt truly, completely safe. Time seemed to stop in the sacred pond. Maya had no idea how long she'd been standing in the warm water, but the sun had moved across the sky, and the light filtering through the trees had changed from bright morning gold to softer afternoon. Amber, she felt like she was floating in a dream, connected to something much bigger than herself. Luz had continued her ritual around the pond's edge, sometimes singing in her ancient language, sometimes sitting in peaceful silence, occasionally adding more flower petals or burning different herbs that filled the air with new scents. Each change in the ceremony seemed to bring a different wave of emotion through Maya's body. As the hours passed, Maya experienced something she would never be able to fully explain to anyone. It was as if layers of old pain were literally dissolving away from her skin. Memories that had felt like open wounds for months began to feel distant, like stories that had happened to someone else. The rage that had been eating at her from the inside started transforming into something softer and more manageable. She found herself remembering things she'd forgotten, good things that had been buried under all the hurt. The teacher in third grade who had told her she was special, the grandmother who used to braid her hair and tell her stories about strong women in their family, the friend who had stood by her side during the worst of times, even when everyone else walked away. "The water speaks to you now," Luz called softly from her stone seat. It wasn't a question. Maya nodded, surprised to realize it was true. She couldn't hear actual words, but she felt something ancient and knowing flowing around her. It was like the pond held the wisdom of every woman who had ever come here seeking healing. She could sense their presence somehow. Mothers mourning lost children, wives betrayed by husbands, daughters cast out by families, women who had carried burdens too heavy for one person to bear alone. But along with their pain, she could feel their strength. These women hadn't just come here to suffer, they had come here to transform, to find ways to keep living and loving despite everything that had tried to break them. Their courage seemed to flow into Maya through the sacred water, filling the empty spaces where her anger used to live. As the sun reached its highest point, Maya experienced a moment that changed everything. She was thinking about her old job, about the day she'd been fired for speaking up about the corruption she'd discovered. For months, that memory had made her feel sick with rage and helplessness. But suddenly, as she stood in the healing water, she saw it differently, that she had done the right thing, even though it cost her everything, even though no one thanked her for it, even though she paid the price while the guilty people went free. She had chosen to stand up for what was right. That took courage, that took strength. That was something to be proud of, not ashamed of. Tears flowed down her cheeks again. But these were different from the bitter tears she'd cried earlier. These tears felt clean, like spring rain washing the dust off flowers. She felt proud of herself for the first time in months. Not proud of being perfect, but proud of being brave. The water around her seemed to pulse with approval, and more flower petals appeared on the surface, as if the pond itself was celebrating her realization. Luz began singing again, a different song this time, something that sounded like joy mixed with ancient wisdom. Maya let herself sink deeper into the water until it reached her shoulders. She tilted her head back and looked up at the canopy of leaves above. Patches of blue sky peeked through the green, and she watched clouds drift slowly across like thoughts in a peaceful mind. She felt held by the water, supported by the earth, blessed by the sky. More memories began floating to the surface of her consciousness, but now they came without the sharp edges of pain. Her mother, who had died 2 years ago, appeared in her mind not as a source of grief, but as a source of strength. She remembered her mother's hands, always busy helping others. Her mother's voice, always encouraging her to be brave. Her mother's example of keeping love alive even in difficult times. Mama, Maya whispered to the water, "I think I'm finally learning what you tried to teach me." She felt her mother's presence so strongly in that moment that she looked around expecting to see her. Instead, she saw Luz watching her with knowing eyes, and Maya understood that somehow, in this sacred place, the boundary between the living and the dead, between past and present, became thin. As the afternoon wore on, Maya felt parts of herself that had been frozen with anger and hurt beginning to thaw. She started remembering who she used to be before all the bad things happened. The woman who laughed easily, who trusted quickly, who believed in the goodness of people. That woman hadn't been naive or foolish, she had been open to life in all its messy complexity. The sacred water seemed to be washing away the protective shell she'd built around her heart, revealing the tenderness underneath. But instead of feeling vulnerable in a scary way, she felt vulnerable in a powerful way, like someone who had taken off heavy armor and discovered she was strong enough to walk freely without it. Luz stood up from her stone and walked to the water's edge. "The transformation comes now," she said gently. "You feel it, yes?" Maya nodded. She did feel it, like something fundamental was shifting inside her chest. The tight knot of anger and hurt that had lived there for so long was loosening, unraveling, dissolving into the warm water around her. I feel different, Maya said, her voice filled with wonder. Like I'm remembering who I really am. Sacred water does not make you into someone new, Luz explained. It washes away what is not really you, so your true self can shine again. Maya understood now why this place was kept secret, why it was protected by generations of women who understood its power. This wasn't just about getting clean or feeling better temporarily. This was about fundamental healing, about remembering that beneath all the hurt and fear and anger, there was something in her that could never be broken. She looked at her hands, floating in the clear water, surrounded by flower petals. These were the same hands that had shaken with rage just hours ago. Now they looked graceful, capable, strong. They looked like hands that could build something beautiful, hands that could hold and heal and help. The sun began its slow journey toward the horizon, painting the water with golden light. Maya knew her time in the sacred pond was almost over, but she felt ready now, ready to leave this magical place and return to the world. Carrying its gifts with her. She was no longer the same woman who had entered the water that morning. She was someone who had remembered her own strength, her own worth, her own capacity for joy. The healing wasn't complete. She knew that would take time, but the foundation had been rebuilt. She had something solid to stand on again. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sacred pond as Luz stood up from her stone seat and walked to the water's edge. She had been watching Maya's transformation for hours, seeing the invisible weights lift from the young woman's shoulders one by one. Now it was time to complete the ceremony. The water has given you what you needed, Luz said softly. Now you must give something back. Maya looked up from where she floated among the flower petals, feeling peaceful in a way she hadn't experienced in years. What should I give? A promise, Luz replied. Promise that you will remember this feeling when the world tries to make you forget. Promise that you will trust the strength you found here, even when everything around you says you are weak. Maya nodded solemnly. I promise. As she spoke the words, she felt them settle into her bones like an oath written in her very soul. Luz smiled and began gathering her ritual items. Come now, the sun will set soon, and these mountains are not safe for walking in darkness. Maya made her way slowly to the pond's edge, reluctant to leave this magical place. The water seemed to cling to her skin as she stepped out, as if it didn't want to let her go either. She felt different walking on dry land, lighter somehow, but also more grounded, more present in her own body. As she dressed, Maya noticed that even simple actions felt different now. Pulling on her shirt felt like putting on new skin. Tying her shoes felt like preparing for a journey she actually wanted to take. Everything seemed sharper, more vivid, more real than it had before entering the water. The walk back through the forest passed in contemplative silence. Maya found herself noticing things she had missed on the way up, tiny purple flowers growing between rocks, the way afternoon light filtered through the leaves creating patterns on the forest floor. The sound of her own breathing mixing with the whispers of wind through branches. About halfway down the mountain, Luz stopped at a small clearing and pulled out 2 pieces of fruit from her bag. They sat on a fallen log and ate in comfortable quiet, watching the shadows grow longer around them. Can I ask you something? Maya finally said. Of course. Why did you bring me there? You barely knew me. I'm not even from here. I don't understand your traditions or speak your language. Luz took a bite of her fruit and chewed thoughtfully. You think sacred water only calls to certain people. You think healing belongs only to those born in particular places. Maya shrugged. I don't know why you trusted me with something so special. Let me tell you something, Luz said, her voice taking on the tone of someone sharing an important truth. 50 years ago, when I was a young woman with broken heart, I was angry at everything. Angry at the man who chose someone else. Angry at my family for not understanding. Angry at world for being unfair. She paused and looked up at the darkening sky. My grandmother. She saw this anger eating me like poison. She brought me to sacred water just like I brought you. And do you know what I learned there? Maya shook her head. I learned that pain is same everywhere. Woman's heart breaks in same way whether she speaks Spanish or English or Quechua. Healing water does not care about color of skin or place of birth. It only cares about sincere need for healing. They continued walking as Luz spoke. After that day, I promised my grandmother I would watch for women who carry too much hurt. Sometimes they are from my village. Sometimes they are travelers from far away. Always, sacred water tells me who needs healing. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. How did you know I needed it so badly? Your eyes, Luz said simply. Eyes cannot lie. Yours were drowning, even on dry land. As they reached the outskirts of the village, Maya could see lights beginning to flicker on in windows. The normal world was welcoming her back, but she felt ready for it now in a way she hadn't that morning. "What happens now?" Maya asked, as they paused at the entrance to town. "Now you live," Luz replied. "You take healing back to your world. You remember what sacred water taught you, and maybe someday, when you meet woman drowning on dry land, you help her find her own sacred water." That evening, Maya sat on her small hotel balcony watching stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. She felt changed in ways that went deeper than words could express. The anger that had been her constant companion for months was gone, replaced by something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. She thought about her old life, about the job she'd lost, and the friends who'd abandoned her. For the first time, she could think about these things without the familiar surge of rage and bitterness. Instead, she felt something closer to gratitude. Those painful experiences had led her here, to this moment of healing. They had been necessary parts of her journey, not random cruelties. Over the next few days, Maya extended her stay in Guatemala. She spent time with Luz, learning about her culture and traditions. She helped in the village, teaching English to children and assisting with small projects. For the first time in months, she felt useful again, connected to something larger than her own problems. When she finally returned home 3 weeks later, Maya was a different person. Friends noticed the change immediately. The way she walked taller, spoke with more confidence, laughed more easily. She didn't tell many people about her experience at the sacred pond. How could she explain something so personal, so mystical, to people who lived entirely in the practical world? Instead, she showed them through her actions. She started a small non-profit organization focused on supporting indigenous women's traditional healing practices. She used her professional skills to help preserve ancient wisdom and connect it with modern resources. She found ways to give back to communities like Luz's village, not as a savior from outside, but as someone who had received a gift and wanted to pass it on. 6 months after her return, Maya received a letter from Luz. It was written in careful English, probably with help from the village teacher. "The sacred water asks about you," it said. "It wants to know if healing stays strong or if world makes you forget. I tell water not to worry. I see in your eyes that day you are a woman who keeps promises." Maya smiled as she read the letter, sitting in her new office surrounded by photos of the women her organization was helping around the world. Through her window, she could see a small garden she had planted, filled with flowers that reminded her of the petals that had floated around her in the sacred pond. She kept her promise. Every morning when she woke up, she remembered the feeling of being held by healing water. Every time the world tried to convince her she was weak or broken, she remembered the strength she had found in that magical place. Every time she met someone drowning on dry land, she looked for ways to help them find their own sacred water. The pond had changed her life, but not by making her problems disappear. Instead, it had reminded her of who she really was beneath all the hurt and fear. It had shown her that she was stronger than she knew, more resilient than she had believed, more capable of love than she had remembered. Years later, Maya would return to Guatemala many times, always making the pilgrimage to visit Luz and the sacred pond. But she never entered the water again. She didn't need to. The healing had taken root in her heart, growing stronger with each person she helped, each act of kindness she performed, each moment she chose hope over fear. The sacred water had done its work. Now it was her turn to carry that magic into the world.